We're going through the entire history of Commander Precons to tell you what the best Commander deck was from each year.
I'm Mia, and some of my favorite commanders are from Precons.
I'm BZ. Some of my favorite cards are in Precons. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. They've got cards, commanders, and Precons. If you want to go use our link to let them know that we sent you, that would help the channel out a lot, and you can buy cards for the same price you were going to buy anyway. Plus, you get free shipping if your order is $50 or more.
They have old Precons, they have new Precons. Some of the newer Precons they have are on sale right now. Go check them out. Tell them we sent you because we love them. Also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, you can save 5% of your real money tax dollars on your entire order of sleeves, accessories, etc.
And Moxfield is also a sponsor of the video, and they're going to be a little bit later, and you can try to figure out where it is, but you're already wrong. However, bonus sponsor, Richard Kane Ferguson. Maybe you've heard of him, one of the greatest Magic artists to ever live. He's doing his very first ever Kickstarter campaign. He's offering extremely limited edition playmats and prints from old cards, plus some of his new stuff.
It is fully funded, and there are stretch goals right now that you can vote on. These are such gorgeous arts. They have Force of Will and the Four Tutors, Enlightened, Mystical, Vampiric, and Worldly. It looks so good.
Yes, use our link in the description if you want to check out and buy some of this awesome playmats, and that's important because it'll let them know we sent you. So we're taking a look at every year Commander Precons were released, and we're going to tell you what the best Precon from that entire year was. So we're going to look at every set that was released in a given year. We're going to talk about the best deck, and we're going to go over what its game plan is, what the enablers are in that deck, and then some of the win cons that it uses to finish the game. And there's no better place to start than the earliest possible year we could do this, 2011. What was released? Commander 2011. This was the first ever Commander product, and therefore the first ever round of Commander Precons. There's only 5 of them. There was they were kind of low power. You know, we were just getting into Commander. Wizards wasn't sure what a Precon exclusive card was supposed to look like.
I mean, this is better than the old Elder Dragons where people actually started playing Commander, and the best deck from this time era is Devour for Power, which include the Mimeoplasm, 2 black, green, blue for a 0/0. ETB, you exile 2 cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards with a number of additional 1/1 counters equal to the power of the other card. This is awesome because you can snipe cards in other people's graveyards too, and then just get copies of really cool creatures.
Yeah, this deck is looking to fill the graveyard. It's a little clunky at doing that. It doesn't have very many good self-mill things, but it also wants to make the Mimeoplasm into like this monster with cool abilities. Some of the cards that I liked were like Artisan of Kozilek for massive amounts of power counters, or Avatar of Woe to have that be the abilities that Mimeoplasm gets, and now you can just start destroying creatures with it. And you could even mix and match, right? Like you could make a Mimeoplasm an Annihilator with a bunch of counters on it too.
That's so nasty. Surprisingly, even though these were kind of janky Precons, there are win cons in them that we still play in graveyard decks today. One of them being Living Death. You're going to have the best graveyard, so why not just use that to your advantage and get rid of everyone else's graveyards, and because they won't be as good as yours.
Yeah, I like this because if you have Living Death in your hand in the opening, you can use Mimeoplasm to hate out their best creatures in their graveyards, and then as you go, now you can fire off Living Death, get all your stuff back anyway. Actually, just a silly card. Definitely, I think, above the power level of Precons they make today. I don't really think they've released Living Death in a Precon since then. And it's interesting because a lot of the cards were bad and worse, but then there's like 5% of the cards in these older Precons that are just like completely off the chain. We also have Buried Alive and Grave Pact in here. Buried Alive can tutor up your best stuff so that Mimeoplasm is always the best combination it can possibly be from this Precon. And Grave Pact, there's not a lot of sack outlets here, but if it's going and your creatures are dying repeatedly, your opponents can't play the game.
I mean, some people might try and use removal on your stuff, and then you can just have Grave Pact out. It's like, okay, well, you'll have to sack stuff too.
We're going to move on to the year 2012. Quick quiz for you. What was released this year? Answer, nothing. If you said anything, you were wrong. The only thing that was released was Commander's Arsenal, but that was a set of 18 foils and 10 oversized foils of Commanders and Commander cards. It was just sort of like a little bit of reprints for Commander because they were like, hey, this is pretty popular. We're going to start making these every year. But I think there was like some product delays or something. So we're just going to jump to the next year, which is 2013. And the only thing released this year was Commander 2013. These were sort of, I think they were looking at Commander and they're like, how can we bend this, right? A lot of them had, you know, put from command zone on the battlefield, or it had Eminence was the first time we saw this. But the best deck of these was Power Hungry with Prosh, Sky Raider of Care. What does that do?
It's a 3 black, green, red for a 5/5. When you cast it, you create X01 kobolds named Kobolds of Care's Keep, where X is the amount of mana spent on it. Flying, and you sack a creature, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. You could get a lot of value by this by sacrificing to Prosh, or just getting a lot of recursion triggers.
Yeah, this deck, I think, was a little bit, below par of what we'd expect from a Precon, but Prosh carries it because he can get +1/+0. So even if you just cast him for 6, you get 6 dudes. That's infinite chump blockers, and now he's potentially 11 in the air, and that's already halfway to Commanders. So like, there's a lot of stuff going on with Prosh. Honestly, we probably should have had him in our recent video of toxic older Commanders, because Prosh is messed up. You know what? Every time they tried to bend us, they were like Derevi and Oloro and Prosh. It's like, whoa, it's always silly. It always ended up being silly when they bent the basic rules of the command zone.
I'm surprised we don't see Prosh more often to this day. I haven't played against a Prosh deck since I started playing Commander for the most part. Maybe I did in the very beginning, but it still has legs, I think.
Yeah, this deck wanted to use enablers like Stronghold Assassin and Tooth and Claw, so it did have other sack outlets in it besides just Prosh. And I actually found an infinite combo in here. Didn't know that. You can use Tooth and Claw with Primal Vigor, which doubles everybody's tokens. So now it says sack 2 creatures, make 2 3/1s. That's already infinite, but you don't get anything out of it. So you got to throw in a death trigger like Stalking Vengeance, another win con on this deck. Now you have those 3 in play. Granted, they are 4, 5, and 8 mana, but that is infinity. And I don't know of too many Commander Precons that can go infinite. Also, we're leaning on Prosh pretty hard because he flies and he can be 21 pretty easily.
I mean, this is also the olden days of Commander Precons too, where everything was a lot slower. We don't have the value that we have today, so you had the time to build up to this if you really wanted to. Moving on to 2014, this is when Commander 2014 was released. This is the monocolored Planeswalker decks, and the best one, which I still see played in Elf Ball decks today, is Guided by Nature, also commanded by Freyalise, Land of War's Fury. 3 green for a Planeswalker. This can be your commander, and its start and loyalty is 3. +2, you create a 1/1 that can tap to add green. You have -2 to destroy an artifact or enchantment, or -6, draw a card for each green creature you control. It is Elf Ball. This is just value elves. Get a bunch of cards if you can get to that ultimate, but if you can't, it doesn't matter because you're still getting mana dorks and you're still getting removal on your commander.
This is one of the best Precons ever. I don't know what was going on that made this Precon such an absolute mega all-star standout, but I love Guided by Nature, and they've got things like Priest of Titania and Elvish Archdruid. Those are some of the best elf payoffs that exist, and this deck was able to play Freyalise on turn 3 or 4 and then ++ ultimate and just take over the game. And let me read you some of these win cons, because I don't think there's ever been a Commander Precon that has had more like straight up win cons than this one. We have Azuri, Renegade Leader, Thunderfoot Baloth, Siege Behemoth, Overrun, Overwhelming Stampede, and Beastmaster's Ascension. And I left out some of them that were a little bit iffy. There's like the elf card that puts X counters on something, where X is your elves, or there's like something that makes creatures into 5/5s. I just left those out because these are definite win conditions, and there's arguments to be made for more. And that's like unheard of in Precons.
These are incredibly solid. I still play Azuri in my Elf Ball deck, and that's kept up with 2024 standards. But Overrun, you Overwhelming Stampede, I've seen these recently too. They're still playable.
Absolutely. And if you wanted to support us, maybe you're thinking this video is pretty cool, I just want to do a quick shout out for our Patreon. We've got exclusive gameplay, exclusive content, podcasts, and all this stuff. And if you want your deck audited by us personally to use some of our fine-tuning skills, just go ahead and check it out. But we're going to go to 2015. This was Commander 2015, and this was experience counters. We got a lot of experience counter commanders, and the best one of those, Plunder the Graves, aka Marin of Clan Neltoth. She's 2 black-green for a 3/4. When your creatures die, you get experience, and your end step, you choose a creature in your graveyard. If its mana value is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, reanimate it. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Now, this is a very strong commander because if you have no experience, it still does something, and I don't think that was true of any other experience commander.
Dude, I got gifted the giant one. It was like a Boros giant one,
Calamity.
and it was so bad. It's kind of insane how much power discrepancy there was among these Precons.
I forgot about that one. The game plan for Marin is just to fill the graveyard and then reanimate all your stuff turn after turn, and it just gets incrementally stronger with experience. But like we said, even if she just sits in play, you get a raised dead every turn. And I'm checking now in my encyclopedia here. No other experience counter commander does anything if you have 0 experience.
It's really crazy too because experience counters never go away. So it doesn't matter if Marin's been taken off the board 4 or 5 times, whatever, because the experience counters are on you, and barely anything in the game can take those away.
Yeah, this deck also had some of the better enablers for this deck, like Satyr Wayfinder and Sakura Tribuilder. Sakura Tribuilder on turn 2 into Marin turn 3 is probably one of the best fair curves you can have with it, and this deck was capable of doing it. The win cons were like a little bit lacking. We had Kessig Cage Breakers, which can make a bunch of attacking wolves, Pathbreaker Irex, which is a good one. That's like a straight up overrun. But then like Mazarak, Crawl Death Priest, if we can sacrifice enough stuff, it was okay. I think it was solid at closing.
It's fine. I mean, it's a Precon, right? You're just trying to get people to learn how to play. This is pretty solid, I'd say. We're on to the year 2016 now, and these are the 4-color Precon commanders. The best deck in here of Commander 2016 is Invent Superiority with Brea, Ethereum Shaper. White, blue, red, black for a 4/4. ETBs create 2 blue Thopter tokens, and if you pay 2 and stack 2 artifacts, you could either deal 3 to target player Planeswalker, creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, or you gain 5 life. This is incredibly versatile, especially since she makes the Thopters that you can sacrifice immediately upon coming in.
Yeah, already a pretty strong package. This deck's looking to get artifacts down, sacrifice the little ones, kind of put out bigger ones also. There's like a Reanimator sub-theme kind of. We have things like Duretti, Scrap Savant, which can exchange, like a Thopter for a big artifact. I think Spine of Ishtar might have been in here. Trash for Treasure is another way to reanimate them in exchange for small ones. And I think even like Beacon of Unrest was also in here.
I think Brea is incredibly powerful. Just paying 2 mana, that's really an awesome just rate to be doing things. And also, I have her in the 99 of Ramos. She's a powerhouse.
She's one of the commanders that like extends out past just building a Brea deck. Like Brea can show up in decks. She is 4 colors, so probably just Wooburg or that combination. But the win cons in this deck, they're okay. Godo for extra combats, it's a little shaky, but Jorkadine at least gives +3/+0, and Hellkite Tyrant, if you can get to 20 artifacts, Brea's 3 by herself, and maybe if you hit somebody, you see all their signets, that could be a way to win. But maybe overall this deck's a little lacking. But in general, I remember these 4-color Precons, they were just a little clunky. Like the mana wasn't great, because this is even before Wizards was giving us rare lands.
I know people are going to be like, in before Atraxa. It's like, that deck wasn't a good deck for the most part. Atraxa is good, but the deck itself was not as solid as this.
Yeah, it was all about like +1 counters. I think Brea will give you more advantage, just kind of game to game with these Precons than Atraxa would, because Atraxa will proliferate. She'll represent power and toughness, but I think Brea just gives you so many tools to fiddle around with.
The year is 2017 now, and Commander 2017 came out. These are the Eminence decks. What's the best deck from this?
Okay, I need so many asterisks and prefixes, pre things with this. So number 1, the Anala deck, the Wizards deck. Kind of just non-functional. I went through and looked over all these decks. We're actually working on a different project that I was already aware of these decks' quality. So Anala basically just doesn't function. Half the Wizards don't work with making token copies, and the other half of the deck is just trash. So Anala was out. Ur-Dragon I thought was very clunky. A lot of bulk rare dragons in there. There was like Scourge of Valkus is one of the only good ones. And the mana was pretty atrocious for a 5-color deck, especially the Precon of this age. And I don't really think the Edgar deck was all that good either. There were 26 vampires, if I remember correctly, that were not Edgar. There was this weird life gain theme that they just put a bunch of stuff in, and there was almost no ways to gain life in the deck. It was not... I look at the Edgar deck, and I think that they knew how good Edgar was, and it was pretty heavily nerfed. So that sort of leaves, by default, Feline Ferocity as the best deck with Arabo, Roar of the World. 3 white-green for a 5/5 Eminence. A cat gets +3/+3. Whenever another cat you control attacks, you can pay 1 green-white. If you do, it gains Trample and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. Now, this deck, last deck standing, I guess, just wanted to land early cats, throw the Eminence buff on, and then get big damage in. There's also an equipment sub-theme, pretty heavy equipment sub-theme, because there weren't a ton of cats back then. However, this deck still has upwards of 20-something cats in it, but you could reasonably assume that you could get a Ravo down, buff up a cat, and then attack for a lot with it because it gave +X/+X.
I can speak on the 2017 Precons a little because this is when I started playing Commander, and I was playing against the Ur-Dragon one a lot that was unchanged, and mine was somewhat changed. I had a friend who changed it up with the Rivals of Ixalan vampires and that sort of thing.
You had Edgar?
Yeah, you really needed to change it, and there were still a lot of stinky ones left. And the Ur-Dragon one, it was just so susceptible to removal, and if Ur-Dragon wasn't out and you didn't have like Urza's Incubator, you didn't do anything for about 6 turns.
Yeah, so there's some enablers in this deck, like Hungry Lynx and Kasali Slingers, just some cat payoffs to keep the wheels turning and get things going. Win cons, there's a few. Jazal Goldmane, if you're attacking with enough, goes really wide, especially since you can activate him multiple times. And I like Kindred Summons is a really good one, because end step, basically double the number of cats you control out of nowhere. That's going to kill somebody.
It really will, especially with the triggers on Arabo. Plus trample, that's like pretty hard to get sometimes.
Yeah, I think Arabo was the most relevant commander when it was actually in play, making your cats really big and attacking for a lot of damage. I think that puts it over the edge. Let me know if I'm horribly mistaken and which one of the other evidence commanders you liked, but I think this one was at least open to discussion, and I feel like we got to the right.
Yeah, I feel like
conclusion.
Arabo was not the best commander, but it was the most playable deck, but a lot of the other commanders were just way better.
They were all flawed decks. We can move on to 2018 with Commander 2018. And the best deck here was Lord Windgrace and Nature's Vengeance. Lord Windgrace is pretty strong. He's 2 red, black, green for a Planeswalker, starts at 5 loyalty, +2 discard, draw. If land was discarded, draw an additional card. -3, get 2 lands back to play. And -11, you destroy 6 things and get 6 2/2s with Forest Walk. Obviously, he can be your commander. This is all about ramp, landfall, putting lands from your graveyard or hand or whatever or deck into play.
I mean, this is a spicy deck. I love the fact that this is Jund land because usually you see Simic land decks, and this is a little bit of a new twist on it.
I remember this was one of the first commanders that was Jund and did not say the word sacrifice on it, and that was kind of a big deal. So that was a historical moment. We've got enablers like Grizzly Salvage to like churn through our deck, help us hit our land drops, but also put lands into the graveyard for Windgrace to use, and Turn Timber Sower kind of a Windgrace backup of like whenever your lands go to the graveyard, you get stuff.
Avenger of Zendikar is one of the win cons here. You want so many landfall triggers anyways, you're going to be making so many plants. Worm Harvest too, because you're going to have a ton of lands in your graveyard, so why not just make some tokens out of it?
Yeah, those aren't the strongest win conditions, but like if you cast Worm Harvest and then retrace it, that could be like 17 worms. That's pretty good. And then Rubble Hulk, if you sneak through a creature and you got 10 lands, that could KO somebody.
Moving right along to 2019, what was released right then? It is Commander 2019, and technically Throne of Eldraine Brawl decks, but these aren't EDH precons, so don't bring it up. Doesn't count. The best deck out of this is Merciless Rage with Anya Falconwrath. This is a madness deck. 1 black-red for a 1/3 with haste. If you tap her, discard a card and then draw a card. If you discard a card with madness, you can untap her, and you just play a ton of cards that have madness to cast spells at a reduced rate, and you just untap her and just keep casting more.
Yep, Commander 2019 was all about like weird underused mechanics, so I think the other ones were Flashback, and I can't even remember the other ones because they were so underused.
Was it Mutate? No, that was
this wasn't that.
later.
Now we got to find out. Okay, the other two were Morph and Populate. Very, very underused. And obviously, I think Anya Falconwrath was like far and away the best commander, and this deck was pretty strong. It had stuff like Bone Miser in it. With Anya, it just kind of lets you go off. There's enough madness cards to just make it work. You can also use like Zombie Infestation if Anya's not around to discard stuff. And then like Avacyn's Judgment can just kind of be a madness card. It's just an example of one of the many replaceable and sometimes castable madness cards that help this deck function.
This deck is spicy. I used to have an Anya deck that was pseudo CEDH with a World Gorger loop in it because you could just keep discarding and get to it and just churn through your entire deck. A little solitary though. There are win cons in here though. One of them, Faith of the Devoted. That's really good because you're going to be discarding so many cards, so why not drain your opponents and gain a little bit of life yourself?
Yeah, it adds up over time.
There's also Warstorm Surge. Just when things come down, you're going to be dealing some damage to your opponents. That's a great way to be able to just close out the game if you can't get through with combat damage.
Yeah, this deck didn't feel too heavy on combat. It felt kind of like sit back, draw cards, and drain you out.
It's like borderline Solitaire.
Okay, we are moving into the year 2020, and the list of things released will only get longer from here. What was released in 2020? We have Commander 2020, which was Ikoria. We also have the Zendikar Rising Commander decks and the Commander Legends Commander decks. The best deck, that's a lot to choose from, but I think the best deck and a very underappreciated deck in general from that batch was Ruthless Regiment with Jarina, Kudrow, 1 black, red, white for a 3/3. ETB, get a 1/1 human for each time you cast her. Other humans you control get +2/+0.
Humans come down pretty cheap, and especially with your commander's static ability, they're going to be bare minimum 3/1s and swinging at people with so much damage. You're going to overwhelm the table with a ton of humans and then just swing in and just chip away at their life.
Yeah, there's a lot of human anchors in the deck. We got like Sanctuary Lockdown that buffs humans, and you can sort of mess with blockers a little bit. And then Call the Copper Goats is a really, really good card with Jarina because it just says basically make a human for each creature your opponents control for 7 mana end step. Now they're all 3/1s. Maybe you have Sanctuary Lockdown. They're 4/2s now, and you can just KO somebody. As for win cons, there's good ones like Shared Animosity. If you attack with 5 humans, they all get +5/+0. That's already in the KO range.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty tame example. We also have Odric to mess up blocks and make it so all your stuff's unblockable. And then Adriana for melee to make, if you attack each person, their creatures are going to gain +3/+3.
And Jarina is just a anthem on herself, so she counts as a win con too.
Just like Moxfield.com counts as a win con for you to build decks. When you build Moxfield, you're winning. That's their new slogan.
Yes, that is. And if you want to win more, how about you follow us on Moxfield, because that would make you a winner.
You can also check out all of the Precons in their original form in the Wizards of the Coast Moxfield account, run by the Moxfield people, not Wizards of the Coast. Hashtag Moxfield.
Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
Moxfield.
Now, let's go to the year 2021. Let me fill you in on the releases for this year. We had Call Time Commander decks, Commander 2021, which was Strixhaven focused, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Commander, Innistrad Midnight Hunt Commander, Innistrad Crimson Vow Commander, and technically Secret Lair Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, which we are not counting in this because that was basically just a commander deck. I wouldn't really, like, it technically was pre-constructed, but I think Gavin Verhey just took his deck and like put it in a Secret Lair, and the quality of deck was way, way higher. So I want to kind of count that as like a weird outlier.
I think so. That's how we're going to be counting a lot of the Secret Lair decks going out from this, because they are not easily accessible. You can't buy them at like the Walmarts and the Targets that you can usually get the rest of these precons at, and the quality is just so much higher.
That's true, yeah. And for these, since there's so many releases for these years now, we're going to do an honorable mention. I think an honorable mention for this is Aura of Courage from the D&D set. This was a really good auras and equipment deck. It kind of married the two archetypes. Galia was a great commander. I think the one thing that this deck lacked, because it was awesome, was it only had like 17 creatures or something. It might even less than that. It was just a lot less than you'd expect for a deck that needs creatures to enchant or equip. So if you could go really tall on one creature and it wasn't interacted with, you were in good shape. But sometimes you had trouble.
Yeah, I could only imagine. You might just die from normal combat damage if you only have 17 creatures in your deck. But the best deck out of this is Planar Portal with Prosper at the helm. 2 red-black for a 1/4 with Death Touch. Beginning of your end step, you exile the top of your library. You could play that until the end of your next turn. And whenever you play a card from exile, you create a treasure token. That's so much value.
Yeah, the D&D Commander product really slapped the other ones around, because I think Prosper was very, very good as well. The only flaw with the Prosper deck was the win cons were a little bit lacking, but it had great enablers. Basically everything in the deck was an enabler because it was all just card draw. But you had like Gonti, just sort of like, ooh, gum up the ground and take some stuff and cast it later. And Apex of Power if you wanted to go really, really big. But mainly you were winning with Pontiff of Blight to drain them, Marionette Master to drain them with your treasures, or just play their cards and win that way.
I mean, you're not winning with combat damage with Prosper. He's a 1/4.
No, you are not. Yeah, so congrats on the D&D precons being very, very good. How about the next year? You want to run this one down?
Oh my god, 2022, there was so many things released here. There was Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Commander 2022, which was New Capenna, if you remember those. Battle for Baldur's Gate, Dom United, Warhammer 40k, Brothers War, and the starter decks. There were 5 of those. That is like 25 to 30 decks right there.
That's, 7 releases, and we're going to go over the honorable mention for the second best deck of those 7. I think this goes to Party Time. Party Time was pretty strong. I think Commander Legends, D&D Commander was great, and then Commander Legends D&D was also great. And Party Time was like a really nasty combination of things. And I know if you switched out the Commander Nalia for Burricos and Folk Hero, you were like off to the races.
That was the way to go.
It was so strong. But since it did start with Nalia at the helm, and we're just going on the base deck, yeah, we'll give it a bump down. And also, it's really hard to top the number 1 deck of the year, Necron Dynasties with Zarek the Silent King, 1 black for a 3/4 flying. When he attacks, mill 3, and you can put an artifact, creature, or vehicle from among the cards milled this way into your hand. This was just a great deck.
You could be milling yourself and getting value when things leave the graveyard or enter the battlefield. There are a lot of ways to accrue value in here, and I really do like it. Plus, this had a lot of bangers. One of them being Scepter of Eternal Glory, one of the best mana rocks for monocolored decks.
I think just the 40k decks just hit it out of the park, and we're not going to see that level of quality in a Universes Beyond Precon today. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think they just have a different philosophy now when printing those cards. There's just so many good cards from that block of precons, and every deck was very well made. I think the worst one was the Tyranids one, and it was just a little clunky, but I think they were all very, very solid. So enablers for this deck, their number is Legion and Dread Return, just ways to sort of move things between the graveyard and the leaving graveyards and the battlefield.
I like how BZ mentioned that the Living Death had not been printed in Precons prior, and it's actually printed in this one.
See, there you go. Only number one Precons have Living Death.
As a win con. And there's also Scorpio Lord, which is just shot up in price, but basically gives artifact creatures +1/+0 and Menace, which can actually help you swing in for wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Necrons were fantastic. But now we are on to last year, which is 2023. The things that were released this year was Phyrexia All-Will-Be-One Commander, March of the Machines Commander, Secret Lair from Cute to Brute, which is not going to count, Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth Commander, Commander Masters Commander, I think that's what that's called, Angels, they're just like us but cooler and with wings, which is also not going to count for the same reason that Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, and From Cute to Brute did not count, and Wilds of Eldraine Commander, and also Doctor Who Commander decks, and also Lost Caverns of Ixalan Commander. That is a lot. You know,
out of breath?
Take a second, pause the video, and contemplate which deck of these, first of all, could you even name off the top of your head? And second of all, what do you think we gave number one an honorable mention? We're going to go to our honorable mention, which is Riders of Rohan and Blood Rights, kind of tied. There was just a lot of decks to choose from, and I think these two were both very well made. It was Clavileño for the Vamps deck and Eowyn for the Jeskai Humans deck.
We played against both of these, and they're incredibly solid. Riders of Rohan just filled up the board so fast, and Eowyn just made a lot of advantage with humans coming in. Blood Rights gave all of your vampires actually really good abilities. So you didn't just need Clavileño, but there were also sacrifice triggers, and Master of Dark Rights was one of the things in here. That it just overall, these were very solid Kindred precons.
Yeah, so Blood Rights was our number one Lost Caverns of Ixalan precon if you saw that video. However, that video took into account reprints and other factors that were not just quality of the deck. So the best deck for this year, 2023, is Velociraptor, 2 white-green red on Pantlaza, the Sun Favored, for a 4/4. When it or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you can discover X, where X is that thing's toughness. Do it only once each turn. This was big dinos, and I was just really floored by the quality of this deck. It was just very well made. It wasn't the best reprint value, I don't think, at the time, so that maybe tip the needles and tip the scales to the vampire deck, but I think as a deck, I'd rather play this one.
It did have really good reprints, as we'll get into in the WinCon section, but the first Exquisite Blood printing in a while really tipped it into the Blood Rights favor back in the day. But there's some amazing enablers in here, one of them being Waking Sun's Avatar. This is a one-sided board wipe because you only have dinosaurs. And Runic Armasaur, this is going to draw you a bunch of cards.
Yeah, this is a pretty good also because it's 5 toughness, so works with Pantlaza. I just think this deck had pretty much every playable dinosaur in it. So when it came to upgrading this deck, you really just kind of didn't need to. It was just pretty good. Win cons, we got a lot here too. Wrathful Raptors can do work. Zakama can kind of take over a game by itself. Xenagos can pump for big attacks. And then the two big ones, Chandra's Ignition, a lot of dinosaurs get really, really big. And Akroma's Will was in this deck. That was the big reprint.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when it was okay, we'll get to win cons later. But this was a really solid precon, and even though you have to get in with combat damage, it's pretty easy to. Plus, this came out side by side with Jurassic Park, which also had some amazing dinosaurs to put into this.
That brings us to 2024, which is not over, and neither is this video, because we figured, why not? Let's just do 2024 so far. What was released so far? It is May, and we have Murders of Karlov Manor Commander, Fallout Commander, and Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander. So that's 3 releases. They were all pretty chunky. I think they all had 4 decks or more in them. We'll throw a quick honorable mention to Quick Draw, which is a very strong deck with a very strong commander. I think if you can't upgrade it, and we're not taking into account price and reprints, it probably, it suffers a little bit, but if we're talking, you throw $10 into a deck, that's one of the best precons ever made.
I think Stella Lee, no doubt, is maybe the best commander to come out in the last 10 years ever, maybe.
10 years ever?
Yeah, 10 ever. She's incredibly strong, and if you did throw a few dollars to get some instants to untap her, you can really make this go infinite incredibly easy. But the best deck that we picked is Revenant Recon. This was with Mirko, Obsessive Theorist. I'm so happy that they gave my boy a real card. 1 blue-black for a 1/3 with Flying and Vigilance. When you surveil, you put a 1/1 counter on him. At the beginning of your end step, you can return a creature card with power less than his to the battlefield with a Finality counter on it. I think Finality counters are incredibly interesting.
They make for cool design that you couldn't do on some other things, but this was a very, very strong surveil deck. It kind of also surprised us because this deck had Reanimate, Animate Dead, and Necromancy in it, and we're just those are the best reanimation spells ever. They're just in a precon. It was unexpected for sure. There's some cards like Doom Whisperer, so you can make Mirko really, really big, and then get back other stuff and reanimate for free every turn. Grave Titan? Wow. That's kind of overpowered actually, but also enhanced surveillance to triple up your surveil ones into just like graveyard filling monsters.
But with win cons, there was also some money value in there with Rise of the Dark Realms getting a reprint in
Kind
here.
of an I win button.
And if you just want to keep putting stuff into your graveyard, why not Sir Conrad? That's also a great way to drain your opponents while you're surveilling.
And then we already mentioned Grave Titan, obviously. One of the best ways to win any game.
Ever.
Commander or otherwise, even outside of Magic.
I mean, he's a giant.
He's a giant. He makes zombies. It's amazing. It's amazing. So if you want to see more precons, we actually have a video where we talk about these are the best ones, but what are the ones that are most cost effective to buy, not 10 years ago, but today. So check it out.